Hello and welcome back to another episode of Otafu Susume, or Recommendations from My Otaku Spouse. I'm Wes.
And I'm Jen.
So let's get started. So we are back. Today we are going to be venturing into the world of video games.
Woo! Video games!
Brand new, kind of.
But not.
But not. Switch game came out that I was very excited for as soon as I saw the trailer. It's the remake of Link's Awakening.
Link's Awakening.
I was about to say Link to the Past.
Wrong game. I mean, they're all the same.
Excuse me. This coming from the woman who's only played Minish's Cap and
Phantom Hourglass.
Phantom Hourglass.
No, I've played Breath of the Wild as well.
I suppose you have Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, and they're all the same.
Those three games are... I mean, if you want to say there's similarities between Link's Awakening, Link to the Past, Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Time, all that, maybe I'd give a little leeway. But when you pick a 3D game, a top-down game, and an open-world Zelda game... What is the matter with you?
So I was I grew up with the PlayStation. I never had Nintendo, and so I never, as a child, wasn't really exposed to Zelda, Mario, Kirby, those kinds of games. And Wes was. So
I grew up with a Game Boy and then a Super Nintendo.
Played Link's Awakening on the Game Boy a butt ton.
And Link's Awakening, admittedly, has always been one of my favorite Zelda games. So when I saw the remake, I was pretty excited.
Yeah, and I hadn't. So, of course, Wes was like, let's get it, let's play it, and then let's talk about it.
Yes, which is why we're here today to talk about Link's Awakening.
Woo!
Woo! There were quite a few changes in the game compared to the old Game Boy game. And it was really interesting playing it and then watching you play it, because Jen told me I couldn't play it around her because she wanted to go into it fresh, which I totally agreed with.
Yes.
But because I knew what was happening, I watched her play through it.
Yes. It was also interesting because I played it in Japanese and Wes played it in English.
Also true. But it was, when I approached the game, mentally I think I was still stuck in Game Boy world. And so I was doing things that were limitations on the Game Boy that weren't limitations on the Switch. So then when I watched you play it, and you'd attack puzzles in different ways without that mental block in your way, that I was going, oh, I didn't know you could do that. I remember specifically there's a gap that you had to get across, and you just turned around and fired your hook shot at a diagonal and zipped across the gap, and I was going, that's not how you do that puzzle. You can't fire a hook shot diagonally. What's going on here?
There was one where I think I accidentally broke the game by jumping. I did like a button puzzle, but I did it way earlier than you were supposed to do it. I guessed completely by chance how to do it, and you were like, you shouldn't have been able to do that just because I think I found a slight bug in the game.
It was in Angler's Cave, and there's the bit with the glowy stones.
Yeah.
And you made a jump that you weren't supposed to be able to jump that far. Well, you didn't even make the jump.
I didn't make the jump.
But the game still counted you as landing on the platform.
Yeah. So I managed to unlock that section of the game way earlier, which threw me off the pacing for the
which kind of screwed up the rest of the dungeon, because you're like, wait, I already have this. How do I do this? And it's like, you're not supposed to have that yet. So there is some interesting changes by adding, because in the original Game Boy game, you went up, down, left, and right. There were no diagonals. And that definitely brought some changes to the game. The shield became a lot more powerful. In the original game, you had to block the direction attacks were coming. And in this game, when they're giving you 8 directions of shield, there was puzzles that you could solve just by standing in a corner and putting out your shield, and nothing could hurt you, where you couldn't do that in the original game. So that there was definitely some interesting change, there is some minor things too, like when you throw bottles into bottles, they break now as opposed to just the bottle you've thrown breaking. But there was, by changing it into an 8-direction way, there were some big changes that I didn't pick up on, because I'm going, oh, yeah, in the Game Boy, you can go up, down, left, and right, so it's going to be the same,
right? So you were still moving up, down, left, and right, and not really diagonal so much?
Yeah.
Huh. How many times did you clear Link's Awakening when you had the Game Boy?
I have no idea.
So a number of times?
A number of times. Well, you wouldn't have found it, because watching you, I saw you die.
Wait, what?
You died in the game.
Yeah, I died. I died twice.
Yes. If you beat the game without dying, the ending cutscene is slightly different.
Oh, that's what you meant by the secret ending.
That's what I meant by it. There's a slight difference to the ending, but you have to beat the game without dying.
Oh, how do you do that?
you'd play it like I played it, and you beat the game without dying.
Multiple times, fair enough.
No, I mean, the first time I played the game, I died multiple times. Then someone had told me that, so I had to go back and replay the game until I beat it without dying. And so when I played it this time, I just made sure to do that again, because I wanted to see what it looked like, updated and all that good stuff. But, so yeah, I played it enough that I could do that again in a new system, all that, blah, 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 blah. And then there was other changes. They added a bunch more secret seashells. They added in more heart containers, things like that.
What were there any other like big changes that you thought from the 3DS, well, not 3DS, derp, the Game Boy version?
I mean, the biggest change is, of course, going to be you're not on a Game Boy and you're not stuck with 2 buttons anymore.
Oh yeah, it did only have 2 buttons.
In the Game Boy, you have 2 buttons, and you always have to choose which items are on those 2 buttons. And that includes things like your shield and your sword.
Oh.
Whereas on the Switch, you always have your shield equipped, you always have your sword equipped, and once you unlock them, you always have the power bracelet and the Pegasus boots equipped. Any point in the Switch game, you can just hold the L button to dash across the screen.
Yes.
In the Game Boy, you had to equip your Pegasus boots.
Oh, that must be annoying.
So
I mean, I changed equipment a lot in this game, so I can't imagine like being limited to even more items.
Yeah. So like, if you wanted to do a long jump in the Game Boy, you equip your Pegasus boots and your Rock's Feather, but that means you don't have a sword equipped. You're not attacking anything. You're doing your long jump, and then you're probably immediately pausing to put your sword back on.
I can see why they made the quality of life improvement then.
Definitely. But on that thing, I think some of the quality of life improvements negatively impacted the game.
Oh, like
and
what?
I think that from watching you play it.
Oh, like what?
In the original Game Boy game, so there's the warp points.
Yes.
And they made 2 changes to the warp points, one of which I agreed with and one of which I disagreed with. In the original Game Boy game, when you went into a warp point, it just warped you to the next one. You didn't control which one it went to, so if you wanted to continue warping around the map, you just kept stepping on the warp point.
Oh god, that would be so annoying.
So, like, if you wanted to go, I don't remember the exact order, but it went like the plains to the foothills to Animal Village to Dungeon 8 or something like that. And so if you wanted to go to the next one, you just had to keep warping around the circle. But there was also only 4 warp points. So being able to change it to now when you go into a warp point, you choose where to warp to, I think that was a very positive change. The negative thing, and a lot of people are going to disagree with me with, I know I've seen a review that already called this out as a great change online, is I think they added in too many warp points.
How many warp points? I didn't feel like there were too many for me.
So in the original game, there were 4 warp points.
Ouch.
There was...
And there like 8 or 9 in this one?
Well, that's... I guess technically there's a 5th warp point that you can only get to when you use the ocarina to get to Mumbo's Pond. But now I think that might even be a real warp. I don't remember in this one. But so you had the plains, you had Animal Village, you had the foothills out there outside of Angler's Cave, and you had the one that you could find midway through Dungeon 8. And that was it. And in this game, they added in the one down by the lake, the one up by Dungeon 7, up by the tower, Eagle's Tower.
Oh, okay.
They added in the one at the Secret Seashell Hut.
Yep.
And they added in the one outside of Dungeon 8, not just the one inside of Dungeon 8.
That was funny because I found the one next to the Seashell Hut, and you must have still been in Game Boy mode because I warped there and you were like, wait, hold on a second. Where did that come from? I'm like, I found it. I dug it up.
That, though, is one of the 2 warp points that I think negatively impacted the game specifically.
What? It was so convenient.
And the reason why, and I've got a good reason for this, is because they put in enough warp points that you didn't have to walk around the map anymore. And you were sitting there between 2 dungeons going, you looked at me and you went, I have a stick. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with a stick.
Yes.
And if that warp point didn't exist, you would have walked past Terran, standing by the honeycomb, and you would have already gotten rid of your stick.
Oh, that's why.
But because you'd unlocked that warp point,
I didn't have to walk that way anymore.
You never had to walk across the prairie anymore. And so you had a stick forever, not knowing what to do with it.
Yeah, I did.
And that was a problem.
I didn't get that item till the end of the game.
Another problem, which came later, which was the one at Eagle's Eyrie. Sorry, there's going to be spoilers in this review. Slightly.
Well, I mean, it's not like you're spoiling the story. There isn't really much of one.
It's true. But the other, like the one with Eagle's Eyrie, though, is you'd already unlocked that, because I saw it on your map, before you got to Dungeon 7.
Yes.
And so when you had to go to Dungeon 7, you just warped back up there, and then you couldn't figure out how to get in. I remember you told me you had to figure it out.
Yeah. I had to look it up.
If you'd been exploring the hills at that point, as opposed to warping back to the tower, you would have found the dude in the chicken hut who would have been like, oh, did you know that back in the old days, chickens and roosters could fly? And that's your clue to go back to the Shrine of the Flying Rooster to do all that part of it.
Okay, no, that was unfair. I had no idea you could push that statue.
Oh, they'll tell you about it. But but you didn't have any reason to go look at it further because you could warp straight to the tower as opposed to talking to the weird guy in the hills who wants to know about old flying roosters.
But I completely forgot about the statue in town.
True.
Like, there were several points where I'd forgotten about places, or because I was playing it in Japanese, there were a few bits that I didn't quite understand, and so I thought I understood the meaning and then completely missed the mark, and you were like, go talk to that person again. I'm like, I don't understand. What? Why? And that was mostly a problem in the dungeons where the owl spoke entirely in katakana.
Oh, the owls, yeah.
Not just katakana, but also old speak. So there was a bit where I think he was supposed to say bakuhatsu to explode something, but instead, because it had a weird ending to it, I didn't understand that that's what he was saying.
Yeah.
And so I completely missed what I was supposed to do for something because I couldn't understand what he was saying. And I think that'll be difficult for Japanese kids as well, because reading entirely in katakana is really hard to understand.
There was actually something about that recently. Off topic, we are recording this as one of the largest typhoons is about to smash into Tokyo.
Yes.
There is already tons of damage. And there was something interesting.
Smashing it right now, actually.
Yeah, true. But there was something on Twitter yesterday, I believe, that the NHK posted.
I think it was about 2 days ago.
2 days ago? There was, a special notice for foreigners in Japan.
Well, not just foreigners. It was for NHK News Easy.
It specifically said, Gaikokujin no mina e.
Oh, okay. Why didn't they just post it in English then?
Because, as they also came out to say, not all foreigners speak English.
Ah, okay, fair enough.
But the entire post was written in hiragana. No spaces, just a block of hiragana, and that is always the worst thing in the world to read.
Yes.
It's horrible. So when you've got an owl speaking classical Japanese, all in katakana, trying to give you hints as to how to get around a dungeon,
Yep.
It's a pain in the ass.
Yep. At least he had spaces in between the words.
True.
But, yeah.
The owl was also an interesting little tidbit in that it was my first initial clue that they were pulling the game and the translation from the Game Boy Color version.
Oh, how's it?
In the original Game Boy game, it was just, you'd find these stone slabs around the dungeon, and there'd be a hole in them, and you'd find a fragment of stone slab, and that's what it was, as opposed to stone beaks and owl statues. So there is... I had only ever played the original black and white Game Boy one. I'd never played the color remake because I wasn't going to go rebuy a game that I didn't need.
Yeah.
When I had the original, and I liked the original. But I knew some of the changes.
So what about some of the other changes? Because I was playing in Japanese and you were watching me while knowing the English very well. And there were a few parts where you exclaimed with frustration as I played it in Japanese because of certain translation choices in the English.
Very much so. I guess on a minor level, one thing that I thought that the English did really well, which again, I know some people are disagreeing with me because you liked a tweet recently where someone was saying, oh, they stuck to the old English or the old Game Boy translation, and I don't think that's very good.
I'd never played the original English, so I just assumed that they were speaking from experience.
They might. Like, I don't know this person on Twitter. I think that the translation works really well for the game. I don't think, like, for the owl that's constantly fluttering around, because there's owl statues and there's a literal owl. And the owl, they don't overdo anything to try to make him sound old and archaic or anything. Or when Old Man Elrira talks to you on the phone, they kind of give him an old-timey voice, yeehaw, and all that. But they don't overdo it or anything. So I thought it worked really well.
Yeah, because kids are supposed to understand it.
Yeah. I think a great change in the English translation is that I noticed every dungeon you were in is whenever you'd pick up the key to the boss room, you'd be like, you got the key to the boss room, blah, 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 blah. And in the English translation, all the bosses are named nightmares. Oh. Which, as the Japanese title for the game is Yume Omiru Shima, or the island Dreams, or however it's translated. Obviously in English it's Link's Awakening.
Yeah,
and
but I think it's the Island of Dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the whole thing has, a dream and a sleep kind of theme going through it. And so having the bosses be nightmares that you're fighting while sleeping, I thought worked really well.
Because in Japanese they just call them boss.
Yeah, it's literally just bossu.
Yeah, because that's the whole Boss Keys, like the whole great series on YouTube called Boss Keys, which everyone should totally go watch.
By Game Maker's Toolkit. They're great. Definitely watch them. But, so I thought that was something that the English translation did really well by changing those to Nightmare and taking a little bit of liberty there.
But was that in the original Game Boy, or was it an update for the Switch version?
That was in the original Game Boy.
Okay, because I think that's what the tweet was saying, was that the English is based on the original Game Boy version, and they didn't really change much between the two.
But I thought that the tweet was saying that was a bad thing.
Yeah, they were saying a bad thing. They thought that they could have modernized it.
There were some parts that I thought should have been modernized. In every dungeon, you get a compass. There's 2 items in every dungeon, a map and a compass. And the map shows you the dungeon layout, and the compass tells you where chests are hidden.
As well as where you are.
And one of the things that the compass also does is it makes a sound when you walk into a room where a key is hidden. And in the original Game Boy, and in this game, they didn't change it. Every time you get the compass, it tells you, this compass comes with a new feature. A tone will sound when you enter a room where a key is hidden.
That is true.
And it annoys the heck out of me.
Because you've already told me that. I know it.
Well, in the original Game Boy, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you're working with a fixed budget of space. And so there's going to be like one message in the code that says, when you get a compass, play this message. So that makes sense to me because you've got your fixed ROM size. With a game like this, you don't have that anymore. You've got as much space as fits on an SD card, and you can put in 2 messages.
That's true, but we don't know if behind the scenes they were pulling from one line or the same line repeated multiple times.
But I think that's part of what annoyed me is I don't think you need to do that anymore because they reprogrammed this whole game from scratch.
Yes.
There is probably
they could have easily programmed in an extra line for each dungeon.
There was no code in here that came from the original Game Boy. Except for, I guess, the text, kind of, maybe, I don't know. But the other thing that annoyed me about it is when the Game Boy game came out, that was a new feature for the compass. There had been 3 Zelda games before that, 2 on the NES, 1 on the SNES, and the compass didn't do that in those games.
Oh, so when it came out in color, they were like informing people.
So when the game came out in 95, no, not even in Game Boy Color, when it came out in 1995 on the original Game Boy.
Oh, on the original Game Boy, okay.
That was a new feature for the compass. But now we are 24 years later. The compass has done that in other games. It's not a new feature anymore, either for Link or for the players.
Oh, so what they should have said is rather than saying it's a new feature, they should have just said, oh, it also does this.
Yeah, I think you should just remove that entirely. So that annoyed me.
Fair enough. I don't remember if that was in the Japanese. I don't think it ever said it was a new feature. I think it just said, oh, it also alerts you when there are keys in the room.
I don't know, I'd have to go check, I guess.
I don't remember. Yeah.
But so that was, there were some of those, and it was weird because some of those things felt like hangovers from the Game Boy game that didn't need to be there. And some of the things felt like they changed things just because they could. Like one of the messages that, I don't know why it stuck with me forever, but it has stuck with me forever, is it used to be whenever you'd find a secret seashell throughout the entire game, it would be like, you found a secret seashell. If you collect enough of these, something good is bound to happen.
Yeah.
That was the English message. In the original Game Boy, that wasn't the message in the Switch game. They changed it to something, and I don't remember what it was.
I think,
because
at least in Japanese, it was like, if you collect all of these, you can get a powered up version for your sword.
Oh, does it actually tell you that?
It tells you get a level up for your sword
in
Japanese.
That's interesting, because in the English, and in the remake of the English, it doesn't tell you that either.
Actually, I'm just, that reminds me, I think they did actually change a lot of text for the Switch version. Because obviously they would have had to do localization quality assurance, which means playing through the entire game and seeing if it works. And it seems like if you are interested in how the original Game Boy and the Japanese versus English translation kind of changed between the two, you should definitely check out Liz Bushhouse on Twitter at LIZBUSHOUS, and she's been tweeting since the beginning of October the differences between the Game Boy Color version, the Switch, and then again between the Japanese and the English. And I'm flicking through her tweets now, and there are a couple of differences between the Game Boy Color English and the Switch version. So it seems like they did update it slightly, but not too much, so that old fans wouldn't notice.
Yeah, I didn't notice. I mean, except for some of the standout ones, like the changing for the secret seashells.
Yeah.
But just in everyday conversation. They did change the old lady with the broom.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. She's back to saying Yahoo!
Oh, in English?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They removed Yahoo in one of the versions. I don't remember if it was the original. I don't remember when, but there was a bit where she didn't say Yahoo anymore because Yahoo was a rival company.
Oh.
I don't know if that's the official reason, but that did happen.
It could have been character limit, which you obviously don't have in the Switch.
No, because they just replaced it with like, yippee!
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they replaced it, they didn't just remove it. So that makes me think there was more to it. You know the worst change, though?
What?
In the whole thing?
What?
The worst change in the whole thing was something that frustrated the heck out of me as a child.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned this when this happened.
And you didn't have it. It killed me. And part of it, I think, is kind of like with the compass.
Yeah.
Where they're expecting people who played this game to have played the games before it. Which, this was my first Zelda game as a kid. And you're in Bottle Grotto, I believe. I think it's the second dungeon. And you go to one of the stone owls, and you put the beak in, and all it says is, first the Pole's voice, last the Stalfos. Mm-hmm. And that's all it says in English. First the Pole's voice, last the Stalfos. And as a kid, that meant nothing to me. That meant nothing, which was really annoying, because you had to know that to get to unlock a secret staircase to go to the boss key.
And I went up to it.
And and Jen goes up, and what does it say in Japanese,
It says, first the long ears, second the skull knight. And you're like, what the hell? Like, I
was annoyed.
You were really annoyed. I was like, what? What's wrong? And you're like, nothing. It's nothing. Just keep playing. I'm like, okay.
Because as a kid who hadn't played a Zelda game before, what the heck is a Pole's voice and what the heck is a Stalfos? Nowadays, you wanted to ask me what a Stalfos is or a Keese or whatever, no problem. But as a kid, first the Pole's voice, then the Stalfos, I had no idea. All I knew was that there was a room, and the compass would tell me as I walked in that something in there was hidden.
And you had no idea how to unlock it.
It would just keep going, brummer, brummer, brummer.
I'm glad they updated the sound.
Oh my goodness. It was just, you'd always get that little, you did it wrong buzzer sound.
Yeah.
Because I had no idea what a Stalfos or a Pole's voice was. And for you, it's just, oh, I got to kill the rabbit. And I got to make sure to kill the skeleton knight last. Oh, that. It caused pain, dear.
Because I didn't have to suffer like you did.
Physical pain.
Because I didn't have to suffer.
Exactly.
Well, I suffered in other ways because I got stuck, so...
You got stuck because you had an excess of warp points. But on the flip side, there were other throwbacks that you did get stuck on.
Yes.
Because, like, when you get to the final bosses, you have to face Agamemnon and Ganon.
Yes?
The wizard throwing fireballs and the giant guy with a spear throwing flaming bats at you.
Yeah, he was annoying.
Yeah, because you never fought them before.
No.
Yeah, that's because you fought both of those guys in Link to the Past.
Oh, I've never played Link to the Past.
I know, that's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's also bits where the game just expects you to be... It's an updated game, but it's also...
It's still an old game.
It's still an old game.
It's still based on an old game.
So it doesn't do nearly as much hand-holding as modern games do.
Which I really liked.
But it's in that case, it expects you to, like, talk to every villager. It expects you to read every book. I remember in one of the dungeons, I think it was actually Bottle Grotto again, where you couldn't figure out how to kill the Shy Guys.
Yes, no, I got completely stuck with them.
You couldn't figure, and it was because, the default Link attack is you got a sword, and if you hold the sword, you do a spin attack.
I didn't know you could do a spin attack.
Yeah, you know where the game tells you to do that?
Where?
One of the books in the library.
Oh, I should have read those.
But that's just it. It's in a modern game, as soon as you pick up the sword, it would be like, press B to swing the sword. Yes. And it'd be like, if you hold down B, you can do a spin attack. There'd be a little mini tutorial as soon as you pick up the sword. This is a game from 95. It doesn't do that.
Yeah.
It expects you to go talk to every villager and read every book.
In a way, I think I liked that it didn't hold your hand so much like modern games. Like, one of my favorite games from the modern era is definitely Horizon Zero Dawn. I love that game so much. It's amazing. However, and you pointed this out as well when you were watching me play it, it holds your hand kind of the entire way through because you can pretty much go, okay, I'm just going to follow this direction, these arrows to go to the next mission. I don't really have to do any thinking. It's just move and then complete mission and then move to the next one. Whereas this one had a lot of, you had to kind of be clever about how you played it, which I liked because it was definitely a change in style from what I'm used to from modern games.
Yeah. But it's a huge departure. You know,
yes.
it comes from the era when Nintendo hard meant Nintendo
it was hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I didn't have as a kid because I grew up with PlayStation.
Yeah. And there were still hard games on PlayStation.
Oh, yeah.
But it was starting to move more into the let's explain to players what's going on, as opposed to you get a player's manual and you get the game, and that's it. And
I think that's definitely an issue with, like, I heard one of the Zelda games, Skyward Sword. I heard that one is very handholdy and very annoying because it literally tells you how to solve every single puzzle. Whereas up to that point, the Zelda games have always been kind of, here's a puzzle, work it out.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the long-standing Zelda memes is always, hey, listen! And that came from Ocarina of Time and the little fairy that would fly around you and be like, hey, listen!
Oh, maybe that was one that hold your hand.
No, Skyward Sword is the one that's known to do it too much. But Ocarina of Time is the one where it's like, hey, you picked up a boomerang in this dungeon. Hey, listen, if you throw it at the boss, and you're like, oh, shut up.
That's actually the problem with a certain company's video games where they have like hour-long tutorials and it's so annoying, even in their mobile games. I'm not going to say what company it is, but it's like, oh my God, I get it. It's like, why are these tutorials so annoyingly long? They don't need to be this long. Jesus Christ.
Like, let your players have a little bit of freedom to explore.
Yes, and work it out.
Yeah.
Although on the flip side, I watched a YouTube video recently where this guy, I need to show it to you. I haven't showed it to you yet. His wife has never played video games before, and so he sits her down and she plays, I think, like 8 different games. Okay. And he watches her to see how she tackles certain things. And because she has literally no gaming kind of vocabulary, no gaming knowledge, kind of similar to how I had no previous Zelda experience besides a few games which I played like over a decade ago, I struggled with certain parts that to you were common sense. And so it was interesting watching this YouTube video because to her, like, she had no idea, whereas to him, he was like common sense. And I think one of the ones was Mario 2. And from a kid,
why did you choose that?
I think because he as a kid, he was told that he could dash, but obviously there's no tutorial for that. And so when she played it, she couldn't. Oh, wait, was it Mario 2 or a different one?
I mean, that could very well be. But I think part of that would be going back to what I was saying, where in old games, you got a manual and you read it.
Yeah.
Like,
which you don't have with digital versions anymore. They've gotten rid of manuals.
Yeah, which is a shame.
I'll put a link to that YouTube video in the show notes because it's really, really interesting.
But also, if you want to start someone on a Mario, don't start them with Mario 2. That's actually one of the things I really liked about this game.
What's that?
Did you notice all the Mario characters?
Yeah, I did. What was that in the original? Like the ones and the Chom Choms? Is that what they're called?
Chain Chomps.
Chain Chomps, okay.
Yeah, there's Chain Chomps, Goombas,
and the little mushrooms,
Piranha Plants, Shy Guys. I can't remember what their official name is, but little fireballs that kind of pop up out of the ground.
They're from Mario?
That's from Mario. Mario was in the game, except for they called him Terran.
Wait, what?
Luigi was... that's Mario. In the original game, it's more obvious because it's a sprite. But
that's guy running around
the guy running around trying to collect all the mushrooms, Marin's dad, that's just Mario himself.
What?
The dude up in the hills who's playing around with
Mario
the roosters.
Is a mushroom muncher?
Oh, yeah, totally. The dude up in the hills trying to collect all the parrots, that's pretty much Luigi.
What, really?
The frog who teaches you the Ocarina song, that was the boss from Mario 2. That's Wart.
What?
This thing is chock full of Mario characters. And, admittedly, in level 7, you do find Kirby.
Yes.
Kirby was there.
Kind of, but it was like an off-brand Kirby.
Yeah. Do you know why?
Why?
Originally, this game wasn't supposed to be made. back in 95.
Really?
This was a bunch of employees screwing around after work with a Game Boy dev kit. And the guy was like, I wonder if we can make something like Link to the Past on Game Boy.
Oh.
And so they were screwing around with a Game Boy dev kit, and they got it to a playable enough state that people looked at it and said,
oh, we can make a game out of this.
Let's finish this and release it.
Yeah.
So that's why there's all the Mario characters.
Ah, nice job.
And now they're still around.
Actually, that's another thing that I really liked about this game was it was a small, tight game. It was, I mean, it may have been a couple of guys playing around, but it was incredibly well thought out. There was a lot of running backwards and forwards of different sections, a lot of puzzles and discoveries that you could make. And it didn't need to be like Breath of the Wild where it's just so expansive and there's nothing really to do between certain areas. It was there's always something to discover in every single little area you go to. And it was incredibly well designed and balanced, which I think is sorely lacking in a lot of modern games.
And I think one of the problems for that is what I was saying earlier, kind of as a negative, honestly, it was size limits.
Yes.
It used to be you had a strict size limit of whatever your cart size was. The game had to fit on a Game Boy cart. You couldn't put in DLC or downloadable patches or whatever. You had your Game Boy cart, you had that size limit, and once it was released, that was it.
Actually, that is still a problem with modern games. Like, I think there's actually a problem in Link's Awakening is a frame rate issue.
Oh, I'd say that's more of a programming issue.
No, I think it's because, actually, it could be a programming issue. They probably should have reduced the frame rate right from the start so it was consistent. And so it didn't show so much when it dropped. But a lot of modern games, they try to make it so pretty, and in doing so causes the game to slow down, which causes frame rate issues, which then they either have to sacrifice the graphics in order to make up for that, or just have to swallow the frame rate and say to people, you just got to put up with it.
Yeah, that really stuck out in this game too, because it didn't feel that graphically intensive.
No, it really didn't.
So when you got that really weird juddering parts, it really stuck out as a sore thumb, which was weird.
Yeah.
Because it's a modern game. It's not made by Nintendo. It's licensed to whoever it was. I
mean, it was probably made by a third party.
Yeah, it was 100%. Nintendo. It was made by the crew that did the remakes of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask for 3DS.
Ah.
And then this one wasn't. I mean, it was a remake, but it wasn't just a remaster. It was building it from scratch, whereas the other ones were remasters.
That is happening a lot now. Is there companies are hiring smaller developers in order to remake their older games, and it more often than not works really well because it's great experience for the smaller company, and the bigger company make huge profits off of this.
Yeah, and they get their name out there.
Yeah.
And, I mean, despite the slowdowns also, I thought this did really well.
Yes.
But I do think the old style where when a game was done, it was done.
Yes.
I think that would kind of just... It forced companies to either make a good, tight game...
Yes.
Or you wind up like with E.T. for the Atari, where it's so bad you get dumped in a landfill for someone to find later.
Yes. Like, it's so annoying that companies now can run their developers into the ground and then release a game that's full of bugs and then come out with a one-day patch that people have to download.
So many games have day zero or day one patches just because the game isn't actually ready for them to hit whatever deadline they had.
And it's like, why didn't you either schedule it properly or, what about people who don't have the internet? It's still a thing. Yeah. And
admittedly, this is a little bit, we are a little bit wrong. So if you want to disagree with me, put it in the comments, but I'm also going to try to address your complaint right now. There were 1.0 and 1.1 and 1.2 versions of old games, but they never told anyone. They just make sure the next batch of carts that were pressed didn't have a bug from the old one and stuck it out there. Yeah. So actually, I've been watching some speedrunning lately. And there are people who talk about if you're going to speedrun Link to A Link to the Past, you want to make sure to get the Japanese 1.0 cart because it's got a couple of tricks you can do that were patched out later. So there were things like that, but it was done so seamlessly that the end user never really noticed.
Yeah, because by the time the people who get the first edition play it through and then it gets patched and they don't realize it's being patched because they're not going to play it again.
You're not going to go buy it. Or
they're not going to rebuy it. Yeah.
And the games themselves were never that broken to really stand out. And
because
if they
knew they had to get a working game before they released it.
Yeah. which developers don't have to do anymore.
Nope.
You've got endless hard drive space.
Not endless,
but it feels like it at times. Like when you go like, oh, I'm going to get this game, and then you have a day zero patch that's 45 gigabytes. It's like, you just replaced everything that was on the disk. What's the point of me having this?
Or like a patch that's 6 months late and it's like a 1.5 gig patch for the 3DS.
Yeah.
Not that I've had experience with that.
So, yeah, I really do think that some of the old qualities coming through in this game, despite the fact it's a modern release, are things that modern developers should look for and try to emulate.
Which I think is something that modern indie games are doing, which is probably why we're having a big boom with indie games nowadays, is that modern indie games are definitely copying the old pixel games, like either Metroidvania or the Zelda or Mario. Those kind of games are definitely heavily inspired, and so a lot of modern indie games are always going to be the not pixelated ones. Like, maybe the adult ones are going to be pixelated, but I mean the pixel games.
You kind of get two categories of it though, because you get the ones like Celeste, or I've forgotten the name of it, but the one where it's kind of a 2D puzzler where you can wind back time.
Oh yes. Oh crumbs. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
You get the ones like that are very. It's weird. They feel modern in the fact that the color palette has too many colors to actually be on an NES, but then the character detail almost feels like an NES game.
Yes.
But then you also get the ones like recently you and I have both been playing through Hollow Knight. Yeah. Hollow Knight is an absolutely gorgeous,
so beautiful. The music and the art,
but it's still all 2D.
Yep.
You know,
it's 2D, but it's actually developed on Unreal Engine and was developed on a 3D platform. So it's technically 3D, but you're playing it on a 2D spectrum.
Wow.
Yeah, I have to show you a video of how they animated it. It's really cool.
That's cool.
I'll put it in the show notes.
but I think, honestly, something like that, I think, looks better in the end product than something like Bloodstained. I think Bloodstained looks good, and I like the fact that they took the criticism that people said it didn't and went back and redid a lot of it to make sure it looked better. But I still think that an incredibly clean sprite-based 2D game looks better than a...
Well, I think it's because it was made by obviously the original developer of
Symphony of the Night.
So he was working off what he already knows, whereas games like Hollow Knight and Celeste are taking inspiration from those older games and putting their own spin on them.
True. But I do think when you look at games like this and that, there is a lot of those indie games that are drawing heavy influence from the SNES period and such.
But have you noticed how they never draw inspiration from like the PlayStation 1 era?
What? You mean nobody wants to make FF7 again?
No.
Oh, wait.
Well, technically no one wanted to do that, which is why it took them so long to actually find developers who would do it, and they ended up doing it in-house anyway.
And when they made FF7, they just said, oh, what if it looked like FF15? We're not actually going to make the characters look like the old FF7 characters.
No, because nobody wants to make clunky PlayStation 1 era polygon like models with the pointy triangle boobs from Tomb Raider.
Hey, those were hot back in the day.
Back in the day. Or like flat-faced Cloud.
Yeah. I mean, I guess times have moved on, and we're all grateful for it.
And yet, times haven't moved on because we're all still got hard nostalgia boners for the old pixel games. Like,
to some extent. I really do prefer... You always kind of look at the past through rose-tinted glasses.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, when you go back and replay some of these old games, you're like, oh, is this actually what it looked like? Because it's not how you remember it. Like, your mind... that was cutting edge for the time. So your mind remembers, oh, it was cutting edge, it was so cool. And you go back and you play it and you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, it's kind of like the remastered Final Fantasy VIII with the, wow, you're the hottest guy in the room, and his, like, somebody zoomed in on his face and it's like...
A pixel mess. Yeah.
And then they remastered it and he actually has a face.
Yeah.
Like, that's like...
Or the ugly guy in
the
Final Fantasy
remaster
IX.
Is what you remember, but really it was the pixel. Wait, the ugly guy in 9?
Yeah, one of the thieves is always called Ugly. One of the thieves in the crew.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you never really saw anything. He looked the same as everyone else because it was just a pixel mess.
It wasn't a pixel mess. Final Fantasy 9 is a beautiful game, and I won't have you slandering it.
But this is what I'm saying.
It's wonderful, and these rose-tinted glasses make everything better. Don't ruin my childhood.
Lovely.
I'll fight you.
But I think, to some extent, like, I think some people take the nostalgia a little too far. Like, when I see videos of Celeste, it is, to me, it's a little bit off-putting with, I think they've gone a little too retro on it.
I think we need to play it. It's one of the games I really want to play, especially because apparently the movement and how they programmed the gameplay is really good and really smooth and really responsive, whereas I think a lot of the older games, like you've been playing through a couple of the older Mario on our Switch.
Yeah, I mean, when you have Switch Online, you get Famicom Classic and now Super Famicom Classic, which is NES Classic and SNES Classic or whatever they call it, which has been a lot of fun. But I think that's part of it, is that when I went back to play some of those old NES games, they really show their age.
Yeah, the controls you were saying are really frustrating because they're not very responsive.
There's some issues going back. And also when you're playing them back to back, you really notice like how different Mario controls between Mario World and Mario 3 and Mario 1. And you're like, dang it, Mario, why'd you jump off that ledge?
Whereas I think with modern games like Celeste is they've kind of... I think we really need to play Celeste.
Okay. We should play Celeste and talk about it.
Okay, we could do that.
We could kind of actually probably do an episode on just a lot of these modern 2D things, because we're both playing through Hollow Knight. Mm-hmm. You just picked up Ori and the Blind Forest for Switch. Yeah. We want to play Celeste.
Well, Ori and the Blind Forest is a 2D it would be 2D side-scroller.
That's kind of Metroidvania Shadow Now, I think.
I don't know. I haven't played it. I need to play it.
We'll have to play it and talk about it.
Yeah. What a shame.
But to get back on topic, Link's Awakening. Do you think you saw some of what made it one of my favorite games?
Yes. 100%. I mean, I could imagine playing that on the Game Boy in the back of the car on like a road trip for several hours. Like, I kind of wish I'd gotten it on color, because I think that would have been a really good game to play back then. And so I'm really glad that they came out with the remake of it, because I think my coworker was saying like it's a shame that they remade it because it's not what he remembered. But I said, well, if they hadn't remade it, I would have never played it. Because I'm not going to go back and play this old Game Boy Color game, because I have so many new games to play now. I have so many other games that I want to go through. And even if I wanted to go back and play it, I probably wouldn't. So I'm really glad that they went ahead and remade it.
I mentioned earlier that, the same crew redid Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask on 3DS.
Yeah, I really want to get those and play them.
Do you think you'd be more likely to play them if they re-release those remastered versions on Switch?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Like, Switch is so accessible now. I'm really glad that they made it a very easy system for both large developers and small indie developers to work on, because it has so many good games on there now, and people are pumping out great game after great game, both indie and nostalgia filled remakes and like brand new developments, that kind of thing. Like, yeah, if they remade it for the Switch, I would 100% play it again.
Well, I'm pretty sure Nintendo's not listening to our podcast, but it would be nice if it showed up.
Yes.
Do you have any closing thoughts on this or anything we talked about?
No, I think it's a shame that one thing with the modern era is the internet, and so when I did get stuck, I admit I looked a few things up that I probably shouldn't have, because I got impatient. I think that's something that's definitely been drummed out of me now, because as we said, games are very handholdy, but it was a great game. It was a tightly designed game, and it was so much fun. I really, really enjoyed it. So I'm grateful that you had me play it.
Yay! Victory! Oh, sorry. Do. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of Otafu Susume, or Recommendations for My Otaku Spouse.
You can find us on Twitter at AnnieBrosCreative, as well as on the website AnnieBrosCreative.com.
And you could also find some of our sister podcasts there, Real Japan, where they review live-action film versions of anime, manga, and I guess the Prime Animos, which kind of just talks about...
just anime that's out right now and just general anime themes.
And then there's also Fujoshi Trash.
Well, there kind of is and there isn't. There hasn't been a new episode in a while, and I don't know if a new one's going to come out again in the future.
They truly are the trashiest of the trash.
We are the trashiest of the trash. I mean, they are the trashiest of the trash.
Well, thanks for listening, and we hope you tune in next time.
Bye.
Bye.